Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cyndi Mylynne. I'm going to show you a little bit about tell you a little bit about the history of paper making and show you a few different techniques. To begin with, paper was invented in China in 105 AD. The gentleman took a mortar and pestle and he ground up old rags, fishing net, and hemp. He put it into a vat of water and then lifted it from the water on a thin stratum or screen, and the first paper was invented. Most people think that papyrus was the first paper. Papyrus is not considered true paper. It is considered a pre-paper or quasi-paper because of how it's made. If you'll notice, the strips are going in two different directions. They take the strips, they soak it in water for several days. While it's wet, they lay the strips in one direction, they lay strips on top in the opposite direction, and they either beat it together or they press it together. In order to be classed as true paper, each individual fiber and filament must be macerated, freely dispersed, floated in water, and lifted on a thin stratum. And that is not how papyrus is made, and therefore it is not considered true paper. It took from 105 AD until 610 for paper making to reach Japan. The fibers they use in Japan are called bast fibers. These are four of the main categories of the bast family. The first one is kozo. Kozo is the longest and the whitest of the bast fibers, and this is a very clean shipment. Normally there's a layer of black bark, then your green layer, and then the cream layer. The cream layer is what you're going to extract in order to make the paper. The next one is gampi. Gampi is one of the harder fibers to get a hold of because it cannot be cultivated. It only grows in the wild. The third is Mitsumata. Mitsumata has a thicker hemicellulose wall than the other two fibers, and it makes a very creamy, lustrous type paper. This is your Japanese kozo, but it came from a batch that was covered with a layer of black bark. I have over 40 hours of cooking and cleaning to get to this stage, and there's still little pieces of bark on here and discoloration. You can leave that and make what is called a cheery paper, which they use for decoration, ornamentation, gift wrapping. Or taking the same fiber, I continue to clean the impurities out, and this makes what most people call rice paper. Now, rice paper is a misnomer. It is not made from rice because the bast fibers did not grow in Europe, or the Occident as it was called back then. When they first brought the papers over from Japan, they had no idea what it was made from, so they decided, Japanese have a lot of rice, it has to be made from rice, and they titled it rice paper. This is flax. They make paper from flax, and they also make linen from flax. The fiber I'm using today is abaca. It's from the leaf and stalk of the banana plant. It's from the Philippines, and they've been using abaca since the 700s or 800s. Now, a blender doesn't work for me at my studio. As you can see, I have very large sheets of paper. This might make a corner of one of my sheets. So at my studio, I can break down anywhere from 30 to 50-gallon drums of fiber at a time. This also doesn't give me enough fiber for the weekend demonstration, so I did break down a 5-gallon bucket of the abaca fiber into a pulp consistency. This is what it looks like in a pulp stage. If you're using a blender, it will not be this thick. If you tried to get it this thick, you're just going to burn up the motor in your blender. I just have heavy-duty equipment. When you add your pulp to your vat of clean, clear water, it looks milky right now because you're looking at the fiber in the vat. You are stocking or restocking your vat. It will determine how thick or thin your sheet is by how much fiber you have in your vat at this time. Also, paper tends to sink to the bottom, so you'll want to disperse your fibers before each sheet of paper that you use. This is a Western style mold and decal. This is your decal, which is a German word which determines the size of the sheet. It also means as a lid or cover. This is your mold, which is a flat, porous surface where the cellulose sits on the top and the water drains through. The screen has to stay tight at all times. You never use the opposite side of your screen. Also, traditionally, you are to hold your mold and decal with the longer portion toward your body. That is because it is physically easier to lift it out of the vat. Now, what I mean by that is when you form a sheet of paper, you will do it in one continuous motion. You will bring your mold and decal into the vat. You will pick up a charge of the fiber and you will lift it out of the vat. When you lift it out of the vat, there will be a suction pulling against you. When I break that suction, it's going to be extremely fast. You're going to see the water go from one end to the vat. It's called a backsplash. It is also going to look very, very, very easy. That is because I make paper this size all day long and not this size. Now, I don't have room to turn my vats in the proper direction, so I will be holding my mold and decal incorrectly. You're going to bring your mold and decal in, pick up a charge of the fiber, and lift it out. Now you saw me break the suction with the backsplash, but you also saw a very quick back-to-back, side-to-side motion. That is called a vat man or vat woman shake in this case. The reason you do that is being that paper is cellulose means it is hydrophilic. It has an affinity for water. When it's in the vat, it's just kind of like hanging out. But when it comes into close proximity to itself on the screen, it actually interlocks in hydrogen bonds. This back-to-back, side-to-side motion helps with that interlocking. You would never put any form of a glue or binder in your vat. Cellulose bonds to itself. When you drain your paper, you're going to drain it on an angle so you can release the water as quickly as possible out of the screen in order to form another sheet of paper. In the olden days, in a hand paper making facility, there were 3 people per row working: a vat man, a coutcher, and a layman. Your vat man forms a sheet, slides it at an angle across what is called an asp to the coutcher. The coutcher picks it up and couches it onto paper making felts. These are special woolen woven blankets that are made for the purpose of paper making. They are hard to get a hold of today, but you can always go to an Army Navy store and buy some old wool blankets and cut them up, or you can use Pellon, which is an interfacing, although it's thin. You do not want to use felt from a craft store. It is not the same and it does not release properly. Now your couching board is very important. Technically, it's supposed to have a slight curve in the center. That is so when you couch your sheet, which is spelt just like couch, you want to roll it across that board. If you don't have that, you can try to build it up with an additional felt or cloth, which is what I've done. But more than likely on your first or second sheet, you're going to get 1 or 2 air bubbles. You remove your decal. You pick up your mold away from you. You bring it over to your couching board, and you will literally roll it away from you. You do not pick it up, you do not pull it toward you, and you should not be pushing on the back of your screen. If you're pushing on the back of your screen is not tight enough, your felts are not wet enough, or they're too wet, depending upon the material that you're going to use. Now I'm going to form another sheet of paper, and then I'm going to show you how to do something that they say you cannot do in European paper making, but I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. It's called double dipping, where it's colored on one side and plain on the other. In the meantime, I'm going to tell you a story. It's an interesting story. It's a little disgusting, but it's a true story. Remember, this settles to the bottom. You want to disperse your fiber. During the Civil War in Gardner, Maine, there was a gentleman named Augustus Stanwood who had a paper mill. He ran out of paper making materials, so he read an article stating he could use Egyptian mummy wrappings to make paper with. So he had several shiploads of Egyptian mummies shipped to him in Gardner, Maine. They extracted the wrappings, put it into the paper mill along with the papyrus filling, and it made a really nice brown coarse wrapping paper, which at the time they decided would be quite suitable for the butchers, the meat packers, and the stores of the day. That's one reason they used brown paper on meat for years. But it gets better. Mr. Augustus Stanwood forgot. He was supposed to disinfect those rags before he put it into the paper mill, and it caused an epidemic of cholera in the community. So very fittingly, they called it the curse of the dead. That was a good story.